Eureka, California was incorporated in 1856 and is the first official city formed in Humboldt County. Eureka is a Greek phrase that translates to, "I found it." The Eureka community was established in the 1850s as a supply post to support the mining industry. Before American settlers began moving west during the Gold Rush era, Eureka was populated by the Wiyot people. They lived in permanent villages established along waterways in this area, but also relied on the prairie and mountainous regions of this area for different materials and food sources. The primary food source for the Wiyot people was fish, but they also collected clams along the coast and trapped mammals further inland. The Wiyot people, along with the Yurok, Hupa, Karuk, and Tolowa people, effectively managed the natural resources of what would become Humboldt County. They performed grassland burning to mitigate wildfire threats and adhere to strict hunting and fishing regulations. Before 1860, their population was estimated at 1,500 to 2,000, but this declined to 100 by 1910. This sharp population decline was due to disease, resource depletion, slavery, displacement, and genocide. American settlers quickly depleted natural resources that the Wiyot people relied on. As of 2021, Eureka, California had a total population of about 27,000 residents. The social demographic was about 65% white, about 22% Hispanic and biracial, and about 6% Asian. There were 0 households in Eureka that reported speaking a primary language other than English. The median age in Eureka is about 40 years old. About 19% of people live below the poverty line. About 89% of Eureka residents have high school diplomas or more, and about 30% of the population have a bachelor's degree or higher, which is similar to the statewide rate of about 36%. The median household income is about $59,000. The logging and timber industry died down by the 1960s due to pushback from deforestation, which slowed the city's main export. Since then, Eureka has not seen much new development. The original ecosystems of Eureka, in terms of its physical environment, were based in its redwood forests and the nearby coastal estuary of Humboldt Bay, a partially enclosed coastal water body where freshwater from rivers and streams mixes with saltwater from the ocean. Before 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, the northern Mad River emptied into Humboldt Bay, which originally comprised most of the freshwater of its estuary. The bay consisted of extensive mudflats and wetland habitats with adjoining drainage channels and is separated from the entire Pacific Ocean by long sand spits. The bay has served as a habitat for over 110 fish species, 400 species of invertebrates, at least 110 bird species, and over 30 species of mammals recorded there. There were originally about 2 million acres of redwoods in Northern California. By the 1960s, industrial logging had removed almost 90% of all the original redwoods. Redwood National Park was established in 1968. Environmental conservation efforts from the 1960s to 1990s only concerned the remaining 5% of the original forest left on private lands.
Logging, whaling, fishing, and hunting have transformed the natural environment of the region and its coastal estuary into now what is mostly deforested, comprised of streams, creeks, and rivers that have been negatively impacted by the degradation of its once healthy watershed and home to more sparse wildlife, some of which have been made endangered and locally extinct due to hunting and overfishing. In Humboldt Bay, 90% of the original salt marsh areas have been either diked or filled. Diking for agricultural development is the largest contributor to the loss of tidal wetlands, and the salt marsh habitat has been permanently altered by these activities, resulting in dramatically different species composition. Redwood National Park resides in Eureka, which is the most seismically active region in the United States, where 3 tectonic plates meet: the North American, Pacific, and Gorda contact. Redwood soils are comprised of a rich dark layer of soils where trees shed their leaves that are then decomposed into fertile earth and provide a habitat for billions of organisms. The forests rely on this rapid nutrient cycle in the topsoil, nutrient floodplain drainages, and abundant rainfall and fog to maintain a healthy ecosystem. The park also contains prairies and grasslands where the regular fires have been prevented them transitioning into the surrounding forests. There are typically 2 distinct seasons within the park: wet but mild fall and winter, and cool and dry spring and summer. 3 large river systems flow within the park: the Smith and Klamath River and Redwood Creek. The Smith River is now California's last major free-flowing river. The estuaries at the mouth of the Klamath River and Redwood Creek are a transition and nursery area for fish and a valuable habitat for fresh and saltwater species. The most famous native fish are the salmon and trout that spend the majority of their lives at sea and then spawn in streams from November through February. Current species in the region include 66 species of mammals such as beavers, rabbits, black bears, bats, and squirrels, 280 species of birds such as jays, woodpeckers, owls, hawks, ducks, bald eagles, and peregrine falcons, fish, including Chinook salmon, rainbow trout, sharks, stingrays, and eels, and vertebrates such as anemones, worms, shrimp, crabs, clams, snails, and starfish. Risks. Natural risks. Wildfire. Moderate wildfire risk in the next 30 years that is worsened by a warm, dry climate and an abundance of dry vegetation, specifically in the summer and fall. Flooding. Severe flood risk in the next 30 years. Inland bodies of water are prone to flooding during intense rain, and Eureka's coastal location makes it vulnerable to sea level rise. Seismic activity. Severe risk for earthquakes with a 94% chance a 5.0 or higher will occur in the next 50 years. Ground shaking, surface rupture, liquefaction, and landslides near the Cascadia subduction zone and along the San Andreas Fault. Man-made risks. Nuclear waste storage. Decommissioned Humboldt Bay Nuclear Power Plant, now just a waste storage facility, is not equipped for long-term storage, and coastal erosion and sea level rise pose a threat to its waste containment. Water pollution. Several bodies of water are not meeting water quality standards. Humboldt Bay has shown indication of polychlorinated biphenyls, a group of man-made organic chemicals that are highly carcinogenic.
The estimated regional sea level rise of 3.1 feet by 2060 is the fastest rate of sea level rise predicted for the West Coast by the California Ocean Protection Council, and is expected to occur during an 100-year storm event. Studies have found that Eureka's coastline has extremely high shoreline vulnerability. This describes its susceptibility to shoreline erosion, which would lower the surrounding elevation and increase flood risk. Though there are dikes that surround the bay that should protect against floodwaters, they recently have not been able to hold the water back, leading to flooding behind the embankments. Attempts at mitigating this risk include restoring the region's salt marsh, which resides in one of the region's most vulnerable areas. The goal is to restore a total of 17 acres of marsh, an area that has been decreased by about 90% since 1870. The restored marsh would help reduce the risk of flooding and erosion of the shoreline for at least 100 years. The county is also expected to construct a berm with a sloped gravel and sand beach at the outer edges. This coarse sediment beach design is expected to provide a buffer against the intense energy from wind waves. Without such sediment barriers, the salt marsh would continue to be eroded and slope cutting would occur, causing steep formations. It is believed that this beach would dissipate enough wave energy to allow for a natural formation of the beach profile as water and wave levels change over time. Along with this, the coarse sediment would allow enough time for vegetation to stabilize across the salt marshes. The marsh and its outer fortifications will achieve the target elevation of 7 feet, and that the edges will then be stabilized to protect against high-velocity currents and wind waves. The County of Humboldt has received funding from the National Fish and Wildlife Federation and the Ocean Protection Council of the California Natural Resources Agency to discern whether natural shoreline infrastructure techniques are feasible in helping protect portions of Eureka and Arcata. In this investigation, approaches to repair the intertidal coastal marsh, increase community flood resilience, and the use of natural ecological systems for sea level rise adaptation were studied. Each project's projected construction costs was estimated to be less than the expected damages without any of these efforts by the year 2100. The Humboldt Bay Trail South portion's construction was estimated to be around $22 million, while the avoided damage cost is about $114 million. In 2024, the county also received additional funding from the State Coastal Conservancy to conduct more technical analyses and environmental review to look into the restoration of the salt marsh. The management and upkeep of this project would be done by project managers along with hydrologists, sediment experts, and other specialists. These workers would be able to identify any areas of remedial action, gather data on project and vegetation growth, and help shape the project's future goals. Restoration of the salt marsh ecosystem would improve biodiversity and the marine food web, sequester carbon to benefit the local air quality, and reduce flood risk.
Who's most at risk and what support do they need? Most report on Humboldt Bay's sea level rise focus on the most pressing disaster, the flooding and erosion of US 101. With this road flooded, there is no quick or convenient mode of travel between the city of Eureka and the city of Arcata. When faced with extreme flooding and sea level rise, residents would have to plan around these events and limit travel between the two cities. The community could push the Humboldt Bay County government to pass an ordinance prohibiting new construction in areas predicted to be impacted by rising sea levels. While this could be seen as something that would impede the area's growth and discourage economic expansion, it would ensure that the local government and community members who are building do not invest in a structure that would have to be vacated as tides rise further inland. The Arcata wastewater treatment facility is at risk for flooding as sea levels rise. Flooding here is a matter of high importance, considering how wastewater treatment is critical to Humboldt Bay infrastructure. Multiple authorities, including a capstone design project by students at Cal Poly Humboldt, have proposed how to solve this dilemma. The Cal Poly solution is to build a vegetated dike in specific areas to prevent the incursion of unwanted waters. The construction and maintenance would be costly, but necessary, considering it would be even more expensive than building an entirely different wastewater treatment facility. Humboldt Bay has had a historical legacy of diking nearly 9,000 acres of tidelands. There are currently reaches of earthen dikes on Humboldt Bay that are actively eroding, unmaintained, or are overtopped by extreme high tides, making these areas vulnerable to erosion and flooding. If not maintained, residential farmers and agricultural industries will lose thousands of acres of farmland and jeopardize community jobs. Repairing many of the dikes will be immensely costly, and building them up will be even more expensive. The community of Humboldt Bay will have to fund the rebuilding of the dikes and help the farmers, or have services and programs in place to help the farmers when their lands inevitably flood. Bayview Heights is located along the Samoa Channel, northeast of Eureka. This housing complex is at risk of extreme flooding. Bayview Heights is a veteran and low-income housing project in Eureka, a multi-story apartment complex where half the units are designated for veterans in need of housing and the other half are designated to individuals who fall below 50% of the median income in Humboldt County in order to address the local homeless community. This structure is home to some of the most vulnerable members of Eureka's community, and it is crucial that this facility has an action plan in place to relocate residents in the event of flooding in this area that is not mitigated with the existing plans.
Recommended resilience, mitigation, and adaptation strategies. Coastal wetlands could be migrated inwards with community involvement, which would allow them to accommodate more water with rising sea levels and more intense seasonal flooding. More land designated as wetland would encourage vegetation growth, which in turn could help protect the land from soil erosion and would aid in containing floodwater. Additionally, we have seen in other areas that plants act naturally as the first barrier to storm surges during extreme weather events that could lead to flooding, especially species grown in salt marshes, characterized by long, stiff stems, are considered the most effective in reducing water flow. Additionally, studies have shown that an increase in root biomass in coastal ecosystems is correlated with greater resistance to disturbance and greater resilience to sediment erosion. Maintaining sediment is a crucial component to the survival of coastal wetlands. If they are able to accrue and maintain sediment at a rate fast enough to counter sea level rise, this ecosystem will continue to thrive above the high water line. If this were to occur, the risk of flooding in Eureka would be greatly minimized, and the coastal wetlands would provide protection to the community from extreme weather events, even with the increase in sea level rise.